Welcome to the Intentional Encourager podcast, where each episode brings you compelling conversations and stories designed to entertain, enlighten, and encourage. And now here's your host, Brian Sexton.
And welcome into the Intentional Encourager podcast. I'm your host, Brian Sexton. Thank you for joining us again today. This conversation that we're going to have is a conversation not only I've looked forward to having, but I want to introduce you to a dear friend of mine. I've known this man almost 25 years. We've walked through a lot of things in life together, and he has such a powerful story to tell. Things as we get into this conversation that are going to encourage you, because he is an encourager. You can't be around him for 5 minutes and not feel good after you leave. And that is my friend, Demetrius Apostolon. Now, full disclosure, he's going to talk here in just a second. You would think Demetrius Apostolon is Greek. Wait till he opens his mouth. Demetrius, how are you, my friend? Welcome to the Intentional Encourager podcast.
I am very good, Brian. Very good. And just feel honored to be here with you.
And see, I say that because he did not grow up in Greece. He grew up in Hinton, West Virginia. So he talks like us.
I talk worse than us.
That's exactly right. Demetrius, you have taken, and I ask people, I start this way because, again, these are unusual times that we find ourselves in, recording this in the midst of a global pandemic. And of course, it hits everybody differently. How are you and your family dealing with it? And what is something that you've learned or gained from this experience now going on 5 months?
I'll be honest, Brian, that Jesus was the same yesterday, he's the same today, and he's the same forever. So we're walking through it, seeking him and loving him and appreciating every day just his mercy and grace on us. We stay in a lot, and I think it's a valuable time to have family time. This was not a house arrest. This was a house rest. And resting in the Lord, resting in what he wants to do. And, he's the deal, period.
You have always been a guy, and the one thing I've admired in our friendship over the last 25 years, I mean, it's hard for me to believe. When I first met you, neither one of us have kids. And we're going to get into the story about your kids. But when I met you, neither one of us had kids. And we were both married for a period of time. And now look where we are almost 25 years later. One thing that I know about you is you're a free individual. You do things that you feel, and you do things that come to you that you want to do. Have you taken some more liberties with that during this time? Have you found yourself tapping into more of those things? Or are you going the other way and going, well, I want to bring some things in and rein some things in and be a little tighter in some areas?
I believe it's a little bit of both. You want the Lord to have freedom to do what he wants to do. And I love the marketplace. I love going out into the marketplace and spreading the gospel wherever that will be. And it's a little bit tougher these days. We all look like we are getting ready to hold up the place. And it looks like too that you get no reaction. You don't know somebody's smiling or they're growling at you.
You know what? I got to jump in here, because before, if you or I would wear a mask into a bank, it'd be a bad day.
Bad day.
And now it's commonplace. But you're right. is that a lot of people, you don't get to see their I didn't mean to jump in there, but it's you sparked something in me, because again, that's been a running joke that you walk into a bank with a mask on before this thing, it's a bad day. But you like going out into the marketplace. What's changed about that for you? Or are you trying to bring back some semblance of normal when you and your family go out?
Well, the family doesn't get out much at all. It's protection, very much protection. So I'm the one going out and doing the groceries and doing whatever. And I think to a point, you have to be really careful, because if you come up to speak to someone, they'll back off, although you're going to distance yourself or whatever. Now, laying hands on people, that's one that you just really don't get the opportunity to do like you used to. But I've done it, and it was okay. I watched people look at me like, what are you doing? But, it's the gospel. It's the commission.
It's biblical. It's very much biblical in the book of James.
Yeah. And, you was asking me what I, do or whatever. Well, every time I watch one of your podcasts, you got all these, real special people, and they writing books, and, they're educated, but the book thing really got to me. So I decided last night I'd write a book. So, I know you have your bookcase and have all the books and stuff like that. So last night I wrote a book. We're hoping to get this out as soon as possible. It's real.
You're real Amazon. Technical anyway. You're just the most technical part. I was a little bit worried that we wouldn't be able to get this Zoom call going today.
Oh,
because of me? Sucks. Self sucks.
Yeah, that was, and putting a name on it, so we're good with that. It's, it's got there's 1 page, 2 page, 3 page, 4 page, 5 page. So the first couple of pages, describe how much that self sucks, and, all those things that go along with it, and I wrote this from an angle of myself, because I'm filled with self on a daily basis, and going to the cross every day. And then after a few pages of really just self-sucks, proclaiming the Lord, because the Lord is what it's all about. The self has to die. So that's all I could think about yesterday. I got in my car 2 days ago. When I got in the car, I thought how selfish I was. I got in the car and started repenting and praying. Then I came back and I went, okay, I feel a whole lot better about that. Wasn't too long, I could feel self, coming back up.
Well, God bless Sherry, your sweet wife of many, many years, because you couldn't have wrote that thing by yourself. I know you well enough to know you couldn't have wrote that thing by yourself.
No, I did write it by myself. It's just that it's spelling, it's punctuation, all that stuff. That'd be, it'll have to be really probably done over to release it. But for your bookshelf, you got to have this.
Sign it, and send it to me. Yeah, I mean, because again, a signed Demetrius Apostolon book, it's got to be worth pennies. Like a Brian Sexton signed book is probably worth about 2 cents. And that's even with the content in it. And I'd probably have to pay somebody. I'd probably have to give them a nickel to take it.
It's always good to find someone who will buy it, though.
Yeah.
Then you can say I sold a book.
Yep.
It's like when we did CDs, all kinds of musical CDs, you really, until someone bought them, you couldn't say they were CDs to be out in the places. And when they were, you go, hey, yeah, I've sold some CDs. That's cool, So, hate to go running on, but I want to make sure you knew about my book.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And you know, I tried to release a CD once and it went aluminum.
Ooh.
And then it went in the trash because, you know, nobody listened to it. The one thing I love about you is when we get together, and we've always had this kind of relationship, is that we just talk about a lot of different things. And that's why I was excited to have you on the podcast, because your journey is so unique, man. And I tell people all the time, I don't have a friend like Demetrius, because your background and your journey has just been so varied, and the things that you do and the things that interest you are just so varied. Take me and the audience back through your story of your journey in life, because you have overcome some things in your life that would have probably taken most people out, and you've overcome them. And go as far as you want to go, and just go where you want to go, because I know the story, but I want to encourage other people with the story of what you can overcome and how you can overcome it.
Well, you know, the thing that when you look back on things, you really believe, or at least I do, that things happen to you, not for you, but for other people. When people are going through so many things, you know, I'll be honest, they think nobody's going through something like this. It's a mentality that sometimes just grips people. So that's pretty much what, you know, I would say about that type of thing. You know, my childhood was white picket fence. You know, dressed up all the time, you know, all that thing. And then one day, when I was, I think, 7 years old, my dad had a reel-to-reel, and he says, "I want to show you something." And I said, "Okay." So he pulls out this reel-to-reel, and my dad was a very humble individual. So he didn't like tell me stuff, or, you know, I did not see what had happened to him at all, until he showed me this reel-to-reel, and so it was a video of "This Is Your Life," and so I'm watching. But of course, at that point in time, "This Is Your Life" was not on television like it was the #1 TV program in the United States for a number of years. So all of a sudden I see this, and they're explaining this this story to me on the screen, and Ralph Edwards doing his deal, and all of a sudden I looked at my dad and I thought, "My gosh, that was you." And so that was, you know, that was what really shocked me, I think, at that point. And, you know, my dad's story is that he was in Korea. He's coming back coming back on a big, you know, charter plane back to the United States, because his father was in the hospital and he was dying of cancer. So on the way back from Korea, a place called Sandspit, Canada, very, very, very bad storm, terrible storm. Their plane went down in the ocean. So, you know, it's like everybody's trying to survive, pretty much. And in that way, my dad was not one to really talk about that much. He would tell me, you know, little things, because it was frightening to him after it happened, you know. And so he was on the plane, you know, everybody's grabbing a hold of it. People are, you know, it's pitch dark, and people are just dying left and right, you know, all these people that's on this plane. And Dad is diving off the plane, saving people, you know, and trying to get them back to the plane. And he talks about the one woman, and it really, I mean, forever it hurt him, because she died in his arms. You know, he couldn't do anything for her. But at that point, I think Dad realized that a lot of people's not surviving, and he began to preach the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
Middle of the ocean, and people were getting saved, baptizing people, the whole thing going on. And man, he's something.
Yep.
I think about Dad every day, and that man he was, and so there was another plane that come for the rescue, and it went down. So they're out there forever. And anyway, I won't go into the whole shebang about that, but they made it back. There were 7 survivors, and they made it back, and they went to this lady's house. And the thing that I think about too with that, Brian, is if that would have happened today, can you imagine the media coverage?
Oh, it would be unbelievable, D. It would be incredible.
Yeah, and there's none. I mean, they didn't even know, at that point, for, I don't know, I think it was almost a day about survivors and all that stuff and what was going on. And
well, and I'll say this is my son Bryce and I were talking about the Marshall plane crash that happened 50 years ago and how devastating it was to our area, and it's still being felt. And it's hard to believe it's been 50 years since the Marshall football plane crash. And we were talking about that very thing, Demetrius, that if that happened today, there would be people in Huntington for days where we live covering that. ESPN, CNN, Fox News, all the major outlets would be here covering that story because of the devastating impact that it had. And you're right, that situation that your dad was in, I mean, you and I would have probably heard about it on social media before we heard from our loved one.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And so, yeah, amazing. When you think about that time, and now you're a little kid and you're taking all this in, how much deeper did your respect for your dad grow, or were you just kind of just in awe of this man standing next to you, showing you this reel to reel?
I think when it was over, that probably I was doing the same thing that I would have normally done, is, grab 2 plastic swords and 2 trash can lids and hit the outside, and we play Spartan, fighting in the middle of the yard, and
Mm-hmm.
and all that stuff. I'll be honest, I believe at that time, which most people, you don't know the impact. The thing was that as time went on, and he was always my hero, but now he's not just my hero, he's a lot of people's hero. So that is how, I pretty much live my life. That, my dad was a hero, never, ever, hardly ever talked about it. And, you saw the respect people had for him and all that, but, Dad wasn't talking about it. And, he went, like I was saying, I watched the reel to reel. When they got back to the States, Dad had a huge gash from the plane in his side. So when the Army was taking him to all kinds of different places, mineral places for him to soak that and, try to heal that up, taking him to do, radio broadcasts, all over the place and talking about the event.
Mm-hmm.
And so he went to, they took him to California because they said, okay, we're going to go out here and do this radio program. And then all of a sudden, they knew that, he'd want to do some things. What do you think? Here's some choices of maybe some things we could do. And it was, this is your life. And he goes, yeah, that'd be great. Let's go do that. So anyway, the thing starts, and Ralph Edwards comes walking out, and all of a sudden he's talking about, this man from West Virginia, and, you can see the expressions on my dad's face, like, whoa, wait a minute. And they're showing pictures of, where he grew up on the screen. All of a sudden, next thing you know, it's like, Demetrius Apostolon, this is your life. And, so dad came up, and he's just he's so dad, it's like he talks like a guy from West Virginia, and he's brought his brother out, from West Virginia, brought all these people out, and his brother sits down with him, and they start having a conversation just about back home and all kinds of stuff while the program's going on, and all of a sudden Ralph Evers is going, okay, boys, we could talk about that later. This was
Well, your dad didn't care. Your dad didn't care that he was on TV. He just wanted to connect with his brother.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was just, the deal. He was showing him the Bible that, he had given him and all that stuff to go when he was in Korea and all that. And they brought out all the survivors. And then they had stories about dad. He saved this girl from the river, 20 years before that. And dad don't even remember. The girls on there talking about it. So, it was a cool thing. And, that just put a, tremendous mark on my life. If I could be, half, most people feel this way. If you could be half the man that your dad is, you'd feel pretty successful.
Oh, absolutely.
I was just gonna say, I know your relationship with your dad and just how much you loved him and the respect and just all. So,
yeah. It's amazing the impact of a father on a child's life. And speaking of that and impact, you were not real close with your mom. I want you to, if you don't mind, to share the story of your mother, because this is a unbelievable part, because your mom and dad split up when you were a kid. I know that part about it, about your life. But your dad takes this path. Your mom takes a totally different path. Share with us what happened with your mom.
Well, like I said, white picket fence, for so many years. And then, as we will say, the enemy comes to kill, steal, and destroy. So, there was some patterns of some things that was going on with her, which, I was probably at that point 12, 13, just didn't know. I have no spiritual knowledge. I have no, godly knowledge, about what could be going on. And the next thing you know, she's going to palm readers, and, she's going to spiritualists and all that type of thing. And she's on the phone with people like that. And she just pretty much changes. These people are basically telling her things. She's believing them, and they are not good things, but they have a silver lining. You need to do this, you need to do this. And she then she was having an affair with a man way off. And so, painful times, just awful painful times. And so, an event happened, and basically my father was accused of something which was totally false, and he moved out of the house. And so we, I was still in the house. Dad never said anything bad about my mom, if you can believe this. He always tell me, she's the only mother you're ever gonna have. You're ever gonna have. So at that point in time, I knew something was up. My dad was living, at another place, and I wouldn't go by the house, and all of our furniture is being moved out. Big truck, all these people are in front of it, and this guy comes. He's there. I go get Dad, bring him down. I said, Dad, this ain't good. So we tried to stop what's going on, and basically my dad got beat up really
So
bad.
your mom and dad lived in separate houses in the same little town. You were able
Right.
just to go
Yeah.
back and forth as you wanted to. Is that right?
Sure. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And so dad needed to know this, so he comes, and they're beating the crap out of him, uh, and they're spraying mace in my eyes, and they told me afterwards, you could have been blind by this, and so the court thing happens, da 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 da, and you think I'm going with my mom? No, I'm staying with my hero, and dad and I make a life for ourselves, and so she would try to get in touch with me, and it was awful because you know the the spirit that would come on that phone, and I would just hang up because of just evil that was on there. And she she was in a bad relationship now with this man, and still the fortune tellers and all the demonic things that she was going to.
Did you ever
And
find out who it was that was taking her stuff
taking her.
out of the house? You said there was a
Oh, that
moving.
was, yeah, that was him. Yeah, that was the man she left with, and her brothers, not his brothers, excuse me. So that was that. They were moving everything out, and she was taking it, which that didn't happen because we got restraining order, and it was totally legal what was going on. But anyway, it's hard to even remember that when you're 16 years, and now you're over 40. But anyway,
Way over 40, huh?
way over 40. Yeah, mind. But in that thing, they left, and these fortune tellers, because of the fact, and she was dealing with witches and all kinds of different things and stuff, and they told her, you need to get rid of this man, and so there were two men hired to take out her husband, and so they came in the middle of the evening and shot him many times, and he was dead. He was a high profile guy, so
So your
this.
mom had remarried, your mom and dad had divorced, and your mom had remarried. This was her second husband, correct?
Right. They're the ones that came down and was beating dad up and all that stuff. And so anyway, this was it's 1979, I think, something like that. And so with all that happening, after after a week or 10 days, this thing came full circle, and she was now, she was a part of this trial, and there was so much. There was like the witches, the mafia, everybody involved. They were flying people out of the country to protect them in this trial. And I'll be honest, I wasn't knowing what was going on. I'm not there. I'm with my dad, and so the one thing that happened was when the man got murdered was that my dad calls me, and he goes, because I was working then and I didn't go home that weekend or anything, and he says, "Where you at?" And I says, "I'm down here. You been anywhere?" I said, "Oh yeah, I've been all kinds of places." He says, "No, I'm serious. Where have you been?" And I said, "No, I was right here." And then he told me the story, and he says, "Everybody's going to be wondering, if we had anything to do with this."
Mm-hmm.
And actually at the trial, I told the guy, when I was walking out of the trial, when they were in hit, and I said, "Don't ever turn your back. I'll get you someday."
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, what happened was this went to trial, da da da, and she was convicted, 3 life sentences. She served 30 years, something like that. I can't even remember the numbers now. See, I knew I was going to ask me, I was have statistics for you, Brian, but now I'm just coming off the top of a 40-year-old head. So,
Well, it's fascinating because you and I have talked about this in conversations over the years as we would ride around together and work together. You're a young adult at this time, man, and you're having to deal with your mom going to prison. And we've talked about that together. And I wanted you to tell that story because for those first few years that she was in prison, it really defined, you kind of carried that around with you. Like, you know, as much as your dad was trying to keep you from it, and your dad was a wonderful man doing that, but as a young adult trying to find your own way, you still carried that around with you.
Yeah, in a small town, you know, the story, my mom's story, was in Detective magazine. You know, it was on the front page. You know, it was a big crystal ball, big crystal ball, and the murder that came out of the crystal ball, per se, is what it said. And so those magazines were different places in Hinton. So you'd walk into places, barbershops or whatever, and you'd see that magazine. You know, so it was hard to escape it. At that point, you know, I wasn't a believer. Alcohol was a good thing to take care of some hurt, pain, whatever you want to call it. And so that was something I was medicating myself with, and other things also. But there was still that thing that was going on. She'd, you know, try to call from prison. She wrote letters and all that stuff. It was awful. But you know, there's a number of in that framework. I found the Lord, and you know, the Lord just delivered me from a lot of things. But I'll never forget when I was standing in front of the mirror in a lot of pain, if you can, you know, you can believe it. And I knew I need the Lord, and it was like my dad popped up on one shoulder, and my mom on the other, and it was like a visual, and it was like the Lord speaking into my heart, going, "What you gonna do?
Mm-hmm.
You got a choice." And we all have choices. You know, that's the thing. We all have choices. And I knew, I said, my gosh, I can't go through this anymore. And, you know, all the pain. So then it was the Lord that began to deal with all these things, and do all whatever that was doing. But my mom was in prison forever, of course. And when I met my wife, Sherry, we talked about it, and I said, you know what? I think I'm going to really, you know, pray for my mom in a way that I never have. I'm going to fast for my mom. And so 3.5 days, I remember, you know, fasting and praying. Sherry would read the Bible to me because of course, I don't read too well anyways, you know. But, you know, she would read it to me because I was too weak to read it.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And, you know, so anyway, it was like 3.5 days come out of that, and without food, the Lord was filling me with Himself. And, you know, I tell this because it's an incredible fasting story, but you get really hungry after 3.5 days. When that fast was over and the Lord had done what He was doing, I was full.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't, because of His life, which had come. And so it was an incredible thing. And then we said, okay, let's get somebody to go see her. Somebody went to see her, and within a very short time, she got born again. So, you know, she then was out. She got out 6 years ago or something like that, lives in Richmond. She's a believer. And that's a great thing. You know, like I said, that's a tough thing. I mean, you know,
What was that first reunion like for you when you and your mom, after all those years, finally came together? She gets released from prison. She makes a new life. What was that reunion like for you to see everything come full circle?
strange, very strange situation. When it was like a stranger. You have that many years that separated, and there's not bonding or anything like that happens through the aging of a mother and the aging of a son. We didn't age together, so it was very strange, and it's a relationship that is there, but it's still a tough one. It's still a tough thing. It's a healing time for myself, and it still is. It will be every day to forgive. Every day is a forgiving day. So anyway, that can be very, if people are going through stuff, you got to have the Lord. There's just no other way around it. This is you can't help yourself, because self sucks.
Mm-hmm. I could go in a number of different places. I could talk about you being a competitive bodybuilder. I could talk about you managing a Kenny Rogers Roasters. I could talk about a lot of different things. I want to talk about one of the biggest obstacles that you and your wife had to overcome, trying for years to have children. Because you and I walked with you for a little bit in that journey, but your story, and I'm getting goosebumps as I'm getting ready to ask you this, because I know the journey that you and Sherry walked together. Talk about the journey from the first time you tried to have children. There is a twist. You're going to want to stay for this whole conversation. I'm not going to give it away. I'm going to add to it. But you guys walked a difficult journey on your road to having children.
Yeah. It was, you always want to develop the relationship, and Sherry and I did. And, I was 40 when I got married. And, probably if I'd have got myself in any way, shape, or form ready for the event of, self not being a part, maybe Sherry and I would have got together earlier, but that's okay, because the timing is the Lord's. It's not ours. And so we just had a great time, together, and it was time for kids. And then it was tough having, we were having a tough time having kids. And so we were in I guess I was 48, and it was like, is this going to happen?
And I've teased you often. That's the kind of friend that I am. I've teased you quite often and called you Abraham, because you had child in your old age there. So, full disclosure, I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry, because that's the kind of relationship we have.
Yeah, you're always a jabber. You jab me, no doubt about it. Yeah. Well, anyway,
If I didn't love you, I wouldn't jab at you.
I know you wouldn't. Yeah, I know how that is with a lot of people. They tell me, I've run into a lot of people, and they're a certain way. Some policemen that I know very well, I found out later just how bad they were. They were really, really great policemen, but bad to the bone. And and I thought, you're kidding me. They're so nice to me. And I talked to them again. They go, if I wasn't doing this to you, you should be worried. So that's
good point.
The jabber, that goes on. But I'm working my job up in northern part of the state, and we went to all these. We found out Sherry was pregnant, which was great, and so we are just excited. We know that there's a possibility of being two. That was the kind of the readings, from the test that was going on. And then all of a sudden, I'm up there, and Sherry goes, and I couldn't go to the appointment with her. And she goes, "Are you sitting down?" And I said, "No." I said, "I'm with the sales rep." He said, let me get with you in a second. So it was a day that it was spitting snow, as cold as it could be. And I went outside and sat on this little place outside this account that we were going to. And I called her back up. He says, "You okay?" I said, yeah, tell me." She goes, "Yeah, we're having 3. I said, "What? 3?" "Yeah, we're having 3. I said, "Okay, that's great." So the rest of the day was like, oh, but the thing about having 3, we never had 1. We never had 2. So we didn't know the difference. We're having these 3 guys, and we're just going to deal with it. And I'm old, and we're gonna make it happen. And it was just something to behold, because when you're having triplets, you go for all kinds of appointments, and doctors would tell you, "You know what? Who knows what can happen?" You get to all the negative things. So you're going through enough stress through the through a pregnancy for people to say that stuff. But it was like we had no doubt the Lord had 3. He gave us 3 names. We knew 2 boys and a girl. And Zach and Madison and John came, and I will never forget, because they had the babies over there, so you can go see them, and they said all these stories about what they might look like, and I'm looking at them. I come over and look at them. I'm like, they're perfect. There's nothing like that you said, the doctor said, or anything like that. Hair all over the place, just doing their thing, and people would come and see them, and they would, nurses, doctors, and everything else. They would come and see them in the NICU because they came early. Of course, you don't go full term with triplets. And they were coming to see them because they were the healthiest triplets they'd ever seen. Yeah. So there were people everywhere, So, and that was the journey of that. And then raising three guys like that for so long, it was something. And I'd be the first to say, man, it was tiring. The first 4 months, 5 months, if you got 2 hours sleep, you felt rested. And and everything's very good. They're just extremely good kids. They got born again when they were 8 years old. Now it's good. We're
now
good.
They're all teenagers. And let me close the gap on this. So it's a Sunday morning, and I'm at home, and I'm getting ready for church, and the phone rings, and I go into our kitchen, and we lived in a different place than we do now. Phone rings, and there's no caller ID at that time. There's none of that stuff. And the phone rings, and it's Demetrius, and he said, "Well, we got a boy, we got a girl." Because in among your circle of friends, we all thought you guys were having twins. You kind of kept that information about the third baby to yourself. So yeah, boy, girl. He said, "We got a boy, we got a girl, and a boy." And I'm going, what? Whoa, what? What did you just hit me with? And your son, John, in full disclosure, you are a lifelong Denver Broncos football fan. So tell everybody what one of your son's middle names is.
His name is John Demetrius Apostolon. And Elway actually means God's way. L for God, way. And although John Elway was one of my favorites, I couldn't call him Roger Staubach. So Elway was a great name for him, and so he wears it well,
Not even a little temptation to name him Roger Staubach Apostolon.
There was none there. Yeah, it had to have a flow to it. You want a flow. So.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, and my wife's very nice to me. Zachary, his middle name is Dylan, and she let me name him after Bob Dylan, who's my second favorite songwriter, aside from King David. And then, of course, Madison, we always loved that name. You know, when we were dating, we just loved the name. We'd hear it and we go, "Oh, Madison, how cool is that?" So, you know, they were pretty. And we had people that even spoke into names, and one of them, and you know, they spoke into the names that we were going to call them. So it was very cool, very cool.
Speaking of that, when my wife was pregnant with our son, we had, and this is why you and I have such a tremendous special relationship, because when I was teaching Sunday school, I had you come and speak to my kids in my Sunday school class. And my wife was pregnant with our son Bryce, and we had gotten some troublesome test results. The test results came back that there was a probability of spina bifida. Remember you and Sherry praying for Tanya, my wife, and you looked at us and you said everything's gonna be okay. And this was 4 or 5 years before you even had kids of your own. And just to understand what we were going through, I've never forgotten that. Of course, there have been more memorable times that I can shake a stick at in our friendship over the years. But as we bring this to a close, what is your biggest piece of intentional encouragement for people out there right now who may be struggling with infertility? They're trying to have kids and they so desperately want to have kids and can't, or they're dealing with what you dealt with as a young man with a loved one that's gotten into some legal trouble, or whatever struggle or obstacle they're going through. Demetrius, leave the audience today with some intentional encouragement.
It's tough not to get discouraged. You know, it's tough not to be frustrated. Everything looks like a now situation and no future to when you get in that place. You know, when you get in that place of frustration, fear, and all that stuff, the future doesn't look bright. But you know, it's happened. You know, I speak from my life. It happens. I run into people all the time who are going through things. I share this or share that, and you know, the main thing is that you need the Lord. You need the Lord for rest. You need the Lord for wisdom. You need the Lord for just His compassion upon you. God is a very compassionate God, and He wants the best for you. That's the thing. He really wants the best for you. So you have to continue to walk. You know, it can you know, this life. Here's the thing I really want to share is a lot of people get just strangled, and I mean strangled, by those situations. You know, you can't do anything. So basically what happens is it keeps you from what the Lord has for you as you're walking through it. The Lord has commissioned us to go into all the world and preach the gospel, cast out demons, baptizing in the Holy Ghost, lay hands on the sick. That is His commission. If we're trying to focus on our problems will continue to be big. And when the Lord becomes bigger than those problems, and you become again His vessel to go into the world and do what He has called you to do, those things are not so prominent.
Wow. Such good advice, man. Demetrius Apostolon, probably one of two people I know that do not have social media. You and Phil Robertson do not have any kind of social media presence whatsoever. And so I man, from the bottom of my heart, one, thank you. I love you. I am so grateful for all the years of our friendship. And I'm really grateful that you shared your story today on the Intentional Encourager podcast. Thank you, my man.
You're welcome, Brian. As we spoke the other day, I told you, I watch a lot of stuff at times, and you do such a great job. You're insightful into studying what somebody is doing, what their lives are. And that's important because research, to be able to do what you're doing, is time consuming. And so, that just continue what you're doing, and did a little feel for you.
Yeah, there you go. That's right. That's right, man. Demetrius Apostolon, thank you for joining us again on the Intentional Encourager podcast. My thanks, as always, to producer Bryce Sexton and technical advisor Matt Means. And the ultimate thanks goes to the Lord Jesus Christ, who provides intentional encouragement every day through His Word. And until next time, remember, everyone, everywhere, at any time, and any place, can be an intentional